you have to come to terms in your own mind, what you are willing to put yourself through.
In a sport where only 0.03% of the US population will compete, the thought of ultra running or running long distances for hours or days at a time for most of us would bring up pictures of pain and suffering. However, for some, it's a way of life, and one where skill and performance can increase with age. Welcome to the most exciting adventure of your life. Welcome to a new way of living, and welcome to the Five Mountain Adventures podcast.
Today we are speaking with ultra runner and friend Mike Robbert. Mike has been a runner on and off his entire life. Starting in middle school and high school in the track and cross-country teams, Mike has been trail running since moving to Colorado in 2001 and running ultras in earnest since 2013. He has 7 finishes at 100-mile events and nearly 50 ultra races in total. Welcome, Mike.
Hey, Mike.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Oh, thanks for being here. This is going to be fun.
Absolutely. And we do have an icebreaker for you. And just wondering what you're most curious about right now.
The thing that I've been curious about recently is timed events. Something a little bit different than the standard ultra where you run for a distance. There's a different format, which is you run for a certain amount of time and see how far you can go. And so that's something I've been interested in. I've only done one of them so far, so I don't have a lot of experience, but I've got plans to do at least one more later this year.
Very cool. Have you signed up yet, or is that still a secret, or can you share where you're going to be?
I'm willing to share. I have not signed up yet. It's a race called Across the Years. It's actually a 6-day event, but I'm only going to run a single 24-hour.
Only, huh?
Only
24 hours. But
Right
the
on.
reason it's called Across the Years is that the 6 days actually runs across New Year's. And so part of the problem I haven't signed up yet is I haven't decided which of the 6 days I'm going to do my 24 hours.
Gotcha.
I'll probably do it the one that actually goes over the new year to, make it special.
Yeah, that's
what
exciting.
a way to bring the new year in. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. We always like to do something interesting, some type of adventure on either New Year's Eve into New Year's Day or just on New Year's Day. I know for a couple years, we used to go downtown Denver and ring in the new year with you and your wife. That was always a blast, especially when it was like 0 degrees out, right?
Yep.
So, Mike, if you don't mind, tell us a little bit about your background, your journey into ultra running.
Yeah, so as you mentioned in the bio, I've kind of been a runner on and off all my life. I grew up as a very active kid and, started out with the team sports, recreational soccer and softball and stuff like that. And that, those were okay, but not my style. And when I got introduced to the, probably a track team in middle school, I said, hey, this is something I could, get into, and got more into that in high school, ran track and cross country all 3 years. And that was good, but that was, I also did a third sport in high school, which was, I was a diver on the swim team. And so that's what I continued on into college with. And so I kind of stopped running after high school, got into a professional life and just kind of went on my way. And then around the time we moved to Colorado is kind of when I got back into it post high school. I wanted to get back into shape, make myself, and it's kind of feeling slightly overweight. I'm a skinny guy, so not too bad. But I was feeling out of shape and just wanted to do something. When we moved to Colorado, I wanted to make it special. It just seemed like what you do in Colorado.
Mhm.
Is
Yeah.
get outside and running is what I knew. So that's kind of how I got started in my adult life. And I kind of hooked up with a trail running group. And the thing with trail running is a lot of the people kind of gravitate towards ultras, and it just becomes kind of part of the scene. And so, I just got into the wrong crowd and kind of pulled into it. It did take me a while to get there, though, because I started in 2001 and really stayed at the sub ultra level, just running trails and trying to do the shorter, faster stuff a little bit more. And then it wasn't until later that I started to dabble in the ultras, and then more recently, that's almost exclusively what I do now.
Nice.
And for folks that aren't familiar, what's the difference between like ultra running and just doing a trail jog or a trail run somewhere?
Yeah, so I mean, the definition is basically that an ultra run is anything beyond a marathon. It's an ultra marathon. So marathon is 26.2 miles. There are trail marathons, although any trail race is usually the distance is kind of as close as we can get for the trail. And so that's one difference in going from the roads to the trails. And then when you get into the ultras, it becomes, it seems like the marathon is a distance where you can, I'm not sure how best to put this, but you can kind of really conceptualize it and do it, just kind of on almost sheer will. It really helps to train, but I feel like pretty much anybody can do 26.2 miles. When you start getting beyond that, you really it becomes less, well, I don't want to say less of a physical thing, because it's definitely a lot more physical, but it's less about speed and more about getting it done and getting it done mentally. That's the big difference in ultras, is that there is a much bigger mental component.
We're going to come back to that component here in a little bit, because I really want to dive into that. But, as we were researching this topic before our call, we came across some information that was very interesting to us. I want to run it by you to see what your thoughts are on this. It says the average age of an ultra runner is about 42 and a half years old. And the fastest ultra marathoner race times generally achieved are between the ages of 35 and 45. Why do you think that is?
Well, I definitely think there's some truth to that, although I will say recently, ultra running has started to gain some traction in the younger crowds, and at the elite level, I think that number is moving to younger and younger people are finding it more early on. But I think to get to the heart of your question, the reason for that historically is the mental component, and the fact that it is much more about just deciding you want to get it done. It's less about the shorter distances. Fast times are based on, even at the endurance events, they're based on power, the amount of power that you can put out efficiently. And like I said, that there are some people at the elite level that are kind of starting to do that at a young age, being able to put out that power for a long period of time. But the culture of ultras has been about just mentally getting it done. You go so much slower when you're out there for so long, and it's really about, I just keep saying this, but kind of getting it done, deciding in your head that you want to continue.
Yeah. Do you think, or have you ever found that, thinking back maybe 10 years or so, that ego played a big part in speed and, versus getting it done but now when you're at this age, you're looking at, well, you know what? I really want to get this done. So it's not about being, showing up or, being an ego driven person, but this has to be a mental game for me versus just like, yeah, I'm going to go knock off this cool big race.
So for me personally, that that type of realization is really only started to sink in the last year or two.
Okay.
When I first got into ultras, I did have, I'm a very competitive driven person. And so I did still have the mentality of, yeah, I want to knock this out as fast as possible. And at the you can kind of get away with it at the shorter ultras, like I said, anything beyond 26.2 is an ultra. And so, 50K is 31 miles. It's only 5 extra miles.
Mhm.
And you can, just like in a marathon, you can kind of fake your way through it. But anyways, I kind of lost my train of thought there. But at the far end, when you get up to 100 miles, thinking that you're gonna be racing and pushing your limit for the entire time is a recipe for disaster, or at least it has been for me. And so I still have not run 100 miles to what I believe is, my capability. And that's because I usually start too fast.
Mhm.
I usually think I can do this at this higher tempo. And in the beginning, it feels fine, but it catches up with you. And yeah, so
Okay.
more recently, I have started to really start to internalize that. And I think I'm hopefully starting to get a hang of actually properly pacing for the entire 100 miles. But we'll see.
Nice. Yeah. Well, when you come to a realization of how you show up or how you start, what your performance is, and where you can constantly tweak, that's when it's a really neat place to be, right? You brought your awareness to a point where you know where you can make improvements, you know what you need to do, and then it's just a matter of executing. Question though that came up for us is, what was your toughest race?
I would have to say my High Lonesome 100, was it last year? I think it was last year, 2021 was probably the toughest. That was the one where where I came closest to deciding not to continue. Ultimately, I did continue. My crew basically pushed me out of the aid station and made me continue on. But that one was, I was determined to drop out there.
Mhm.
And part of that was that was the first time I'd done 200 milers in a single year. And that was the second one I had done. And basically I was having the same problem that I was having in the one that I had earlier in the year. And that's what really got to me, was that most of my races are, it's not a matter of if you're going to have problems, it's a matter of what problem is going to creep up that's going to, cause you to, have to reevaluate. And so the fact that usually it's a different problem every time, which is one of the things I like about ultra running, is the problem solving. You don't know what you're going to run into, and so you have to figure it out as you go. But having the same problem, and it was a foot issue that I'd been kind of dealing with. Plantar fasciitis had kind of been in the background, and so it was flaring up, later in the race. And that's where I was like, I just don't want to go through another 50 miles of my feet hurting.
Where is that race held?
High Lonesome is in the Sawatch Range of Colorado Rockies.
Beautiful terrain.
Yeah, Buena Vista area. beautiful mountains up there.
Mm.
I love that race.
Yeah, beautiful area. We've spent months of our lives up in that area adventuring. It's a great place. So I'm curious now, plantar fasciitis, for anybody who hasn't had it, is it your tendon on the bottom of your foot that becomes inflamed? I may be getting this wrong.
The fascia.
Yeah.
Um,
It's painful. It's really painful.
yeah.
So what did they say, or how did you, when you got to the tent there and then they ended up convincing you to keep going and kicked you out of the tent, what was going through your mind? It's like, how did you make that decision to keep going? Because that's a painful thing.
The easy answer is drugs. But, I don't remember exactly which, over-the-counter painkillers I was given, but I was given those and said, go out for a little bit, let this kick in. And I've had to do that in the past. It's not something I like to depend on.
Mm-hmm.
And that's kind of where I was coming from, as I had to use them in my last race, and didn't really want to have to do that again.
Sure.
But in the end, so in that particular race, I actually know the race director, and he happened to be at that aid station. And so, he came up to me and said, look, you're not going to be happy with yourself if you drop out. And he said, it's up to you. But he knew me. And so, he was able to do that. The other interesting thing about that race was the first 100-miler I had done without my wife being my crew. She was off on some of her own adventures that summer. And so she had to get a friend of ours to come help out. And so it was an interesting dynamic of this friend saying she had orders from my wife not to let me drop out. And I couldn't argue that directly to my wife. She wasn't there. So I was like, okay, I guess I have to keep going.
I can just picture Casey, your wife Casey, just writing this down. You do not let him drop out now, or they'll be held to pay. Oh, that's amazing. I love it. All right. So what do you see as like the ultimate ultra race?
When I think about energy and vitality, I think about a kid. They have the energy to play, run around, climb things. That energy that feels like you just can't contain yourself. It's the stuff we've always wished they could just bottle up and sell to us, right? Well, this company's found a way to do just that. Amari's Happy Juice Pack. Mood, motivation, energy, things our bodies can naturally produce when both our guts and our brains are happy and communicating. And we can actually improve that process of communication across the axis of the gut and the brain. This is cutting-edge science. This is game-changing information. This is where science meets soul. This is Amari, and we're helping people feel better naturally. Boost your serotonin and GABA. Balance your neurotransmitters. Nourish your gut. The things that make you want to do. Start feeling better the natural way. Check out the links in the show notes for discounts and more information.
There is no one ultimate. I think it depends on exactly what you mean. What component. There's lots of different directions you can go with ultra. Most ultras are on the trails and often in the mountains, because that's what, if you're going to be out there for 24 hours, that's what draws people, is to see that. But there and there's lots of different aspects of mountain running that can be good. But ultra running is also, especially, we talked in the beginning about timed races. Timed races are typically run on flat surfaces, and there you're having to, it's a completely different experience and you're pushing in a different way because you don't have the scenery. And so it's more of you really have to go inside in order to keep doing loops on a flat course that's basically boring. You're seeing the same thing all the time. And so that's a different type of ultimate, is to really bring it inside, as opposed to just traversing the scenery.
And you just, well, I shouldn't say just, because we saw you and Casey here in Tennessee about what 6 weeks ago, and you were on your way to run a race. Which race was that, and how did that turn out for you?
Yeah, that was the War Horse. I have to remember War Horse is the name of the race. It's held in War Trace, Tennessee. I always get the two mixed up, so I had to think about that. But yeah, that was my first timed race. That was a 12-hour race on a 3-mile loop, basically through a horse field, on a horse farm there. And that was my first experience at having to do that, where 3 miles, so basically every half hour I'm seeing the same thing over and over again. And the other aspect of that is that every time you come around, you're right back basically at your car.
Yeah.
And so it's very easy to drop out. And those are the types of races that really make you focus mentally on what it is you're trying to get done. And that is, just keeping going, doing as many laps as possible.
How would you train mentally for something like that? Or do you have a training that you go through for that?
That's what I'm still trying to figure out. Basically, it's just resolve. You have to come to terms in your own mind, what you are willing to put yourself through. That's the interesting thing about this, is that this is all voluntary.
Mm-hmm.
It's forcing me to do this. And sometimes I have to wonder, why am I doing it? But it's, while you're doing your daily training in the months leading up to it, I spend a lot of time thinking about it and thinking, what is it going to be like to experience this? And I do that for any race, where I'm thinking, what's going to happen out there? What's it going to be like? Or what are the possibilities? And I'm saying this like it's predestined, and there are certain things that you're going to experience, but there's a lot of stuff that ends up happening that you just don't know. And so you have to think through the different possibilities and just prepare yourself for it.
Yeah. Kind of visualizing what the obstacles might be, or the things that might throw you off your race, and then making a plan, at least mentally, as to how you're going to respond to that.
Yeah.
That's great. I'm going to kind of switch to training now, different training modes.
Okay.
And I think we're going to bring it back to mental training in a little bit, because I think I want to go a little bit deeper there. But what does your regular, like, not pre-race, but regular year-round training look like? What's a typical day or week for you?
I would say, so during the midweek training is, I don't know, typically 5 to 10 miles on a single run. Lately I've been taking Mondays and Fridays off to you have to give yourself plenty of rest. I used to only take one day off a week, but I decided to hire a coach this year, and he's had me taking Fridays off. Technically Fridays are also optionally cross training, which I wish I could do more, but I usually get to the end of the week and I just end up taking it off. So Monday off, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday are 5 to 10 miles. Depending on the phase of the training, I might be doing some different types of intervals. Sometimes we do flat intervals, sometimes we do some hill intervals. And those can range from sometimes just 20 seconds to kind of get things moving, to 1 minute, 2 minutes, repeats of that. And then Saturday and Sunday are usually some combination of longer runs. And that usually builds throughout the year. And so, right now I'd actually just peaked probably last weekend for my next race. Did 28 miles on Saturday and 14 on Sunday.
Wow.
But that's pretty much as big as I get.
So you don't necessarily include any, like, if you're doing a 50-mile race, you don't do any like 50-mile days. It just kind of peaks. Okay.
I will, most times before I do a 100-mile race, I'll probably do a 50-mile race in the month or two before. And that's
Okay.
kind of your big training, is that I'll usually do a 50K race in the spring, 50-mile midsummer, and then 100-mile later in the year.
Wow, that's an undertaking. At least I think it is. Wow.
Damn Skippy, I would say.
Does your training, how does your training change as you move closer to a race? Like pre-race nutrition, fueling during the race, I guess it was what I'm curious about.
I guess there's a couple different questions there. I think as I get closer to the race, the training volume goes down.
Mm-hmm.
To answer the first part of the question, is that, like I said, I did 28 miles is probably the longest regular training run I'll do, and then I start bringing that down. And this is I've got my next race is a 100-miler over Halloween weekend.
Oh, wow.
So that's what I'm tapering for now. Getting to the nutrition, that's another big difference when you get into the longer ultras, is that nutrition becomes a much bigger factor than the shorter races, where you can, again, kind of get by on eating a minimal amount during the race. And so you really don't have to train for that. You just have to know, I have to take in a few calories in order to get through a few hours. But if you're going to be out there for 18, 24, some people are out there for 30 or more hours, and that means you're going to be having to eat a lot. Some people actually call these, they're basically just eating contests with having to run. And that's one of the major factors that will slow you down, is if you get off on your nutrition, either if you stop eating, or sometimes sometimes you forget to eat when you're out there. But other times your stomach turns and you just can't eat.
Yeah.
And so during the training cycle on those longer runs, I'm trying different foods and getting my body accustomed to eating while I'm running, so that I can keep fueling, and I know what works and what doesn't. Maybe some things, cause GI issues, and so yeah.
What have you go ahead, Casey?
Oh no, go ahead.
I was going to say, what have you found that does work? Do you rely on like nutrition, food, power food type things, or what works well for you?
I do, and this is where I don't. I'm still working on it myself, but I found that some gels work pretty well, but you don't want to depend on that for an entire 100 miles, because that can be pretty hard to take. I prefer doing like powdered drink mixes, and so if I can get my calories in the fluid and not have to worry about putting substance in my mouth. I often get a dry mouth anyways while I'm out there, and so being able to drink my calories is pretty helpful.
Nice.
The other not secret weapon, but recent finding I've found is Rice Krispie treats.
Nice.
The rice and the marshmallow, and as long as they're chewy enough, and I can drink them with water, it's a good source of carbohydrates.
Curious, what nutrition type products or brands do you find that work the best for you?
I don't have any that really lately I've been having pretty good luck with the Goo brand products.
Mhm.
And that I'd used them in the past, and for whatever reason I tried some other stuff, and some of that worked pretty well, but my next race, that's what's going to be on the course, and so I went back to that to see if I could be able to use the on-course nutrition, and that's been working pretty well for me.
Very cool. Now, leading up to, the day or two before the race, do you change anything at that point as far as fueling or eating goes?
Not really.
Mhm.
You try not to change anything too major. The one suggestion I've had is that you want to cut down on fiber.
Makes sense.
You don't want the stuff going through your body too quickly when you're out there, so you cut down on the fiber. Hopefully, cut down on the waste elimination.
Yeah. So switching into the mental, we touched on this a little bit. When you're out there actually on, let's say, the Leadville 100 or the High Lonesome, where does your mind go? What do you think about when you're out there on the trail actually doing the running?
It goes all over the place. You have a lot of time, so you can't think about any one thing forever. Like I said, I'm competitive, so I try not to pay attention to the other runners,
Mhm.
how they're doing or whatever. But certainly you're aware of the other people out there, and it can be nice if you can find somebody that's running your same pace.
Mhm.
You may run with them for a while and just chat about whatever. That's always a good way to pass the time, if that can happen. But I mean, you definitely have to spend some time. You always have to come back to your internal self, basically doing a kind of a set of self checks. I don't have it's not as organized as that might sound, but basically saying, am I still running a pace that's sustainable? Because if you early on, if you don't pay attention, you can easily just kind of gradually get into a little bit too fast a pace.
Mhm.
Because these races are really run, most of them are run at essentially lower than what your easy training runs are done at. And so you kind of have to remember to hold back even more than you normally would. And so checking in with your body, saying, okay, is this really sustainable, or have I, gotten up a little bit too high? And also the nutrition component is, am I eating? Am I drinking? Am I getting enough electrolytes? Those are the big three, making sure you're getting those in and just remembering to stay on top of that, because it's easy to fall behind.
Oh, I bet. Yeah, when you're out there on the trail for that long, it's easy to just forget about
Yeah.
stuff, right? There's so much time to think, so many places for your mind to go that, yeah, it's got to bring it back to what's important at the moment, no doubt. All right. So, you had mentioned cross training, that you don't get as many sessions in as you'd like, but when you do get a cross training session in, what type of cross training do you do?
I mean, I enjoy getting out on the bike. It's
Mhm.
just riding the bike is a good cardiovascular. It's still working the lower body, not in the same way, but that's the big one. I've also been, as I get older, I'm developing little niggles and that are quasi injury type stuff, and so trying to do also some strength training.
Gotcha.
Usually for me right now, it's mostly kind of body weight work, maybe a little bit with dumbbells and stuff, nothing
Mhm.
major, but
Yeah, I would imagine that a lean physique like you have is very powerful, or it's very appropriate for that type of running. You don't want to be carrying around a lot of mass.
No, but I will say, you know, listen to a lot of other people talk about this, and that there are definitely ways you can lift heavy weights and still maintain a lean runner's body.
Okay.
So it's not something that I'm purposefully avoiding. I just haven't gone down that rabbit hole yet.
What's your moonshot race? What's that big ultimate goal race? Do you have one of those in your front sight focus that you want
So
to get done?
I've got a couple different answers for that. The one that has been on my radar for the longest is the Western States 100. That's kind of the granddaddy of 100s, held out in California every year. They have to limit the number of people that can run it because part of it goes through a wilderness area.
Mhm.
And so they're kind of grandfathered in with how many people they can have go through that wilderness area. And so it's become very popular. There's a lottery every year. And so I've been entering that lottery for several years and hoping to get into that. But that's kind of because the lottery is weighted, so that the more times you enter, your odds improve. That's
Okay.
kind of inevitable that eventually I'm going to get into that. But more thinking about a moonshot as something that may not be possible, but that I really want to strive and work towards.
Mhm.
Back to the timed races, I've always been, an athlete, and growing up, I always wanted to compete in the Olympics and was never able to do that. And I know there's no Olympic events that at my age I would be able to get into, but I feel like I do have somewhat of a shot at making a US national team and running in a world championships for Team USA in the 24-hour timed event.
Wow.
So that's my big moonshot, and that's what I'm working on this year. The race over New Year's would be a qualifier. So we'll see how that
Nice.
goes.
That's really cool.
That is.
What other criteria do you have to meet to be selected?
The criteria is pretty simple. You have to run a race that is on a certified course and sanctioned by the governing body. And then it's just, they set a time period before there's a world championships every 2 years. And so like for the 18 months prior to that, there's an opening that anybody that runs one of these events, basically the top 5 distances are selected for the team.
Incredible. So has there ever been a time where, I don't know, someone told you or suggested to you that you shouldn't be doing that type of running?
I don't think I've never had anybody, at least not seriously, tell me that I shouldn't be doing it permanently. There's always people that will say ultra marathons aren't good for you, and I don't necessarily disagree.
Mm.
I think it is this, what I'm doing is not necessarily for the best long-term health. I think that I'm doing it in a fairly responsible way, that it isn't hugely detrimental, but it's certainly way beyond what is necessary to be healthy.
Mhm.
And so, but I've never had like a doctor tell me you should stop running, or even stop ultra running. Thankfully, I think that if I did, though, I would probably seek out a second opinion.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I like that. Yeah, that's That's our standard too, right? Is always look for a second opinion on those types of big diagnosis and stuff, right? I mean, I won't get into the weeds there, but so where would you suggest or recommend that someone interested in ultra racing begin?
I mean, the first thing I'll say is you have to want to do it. Don't do it because somebody else is telling you to. Because when you get to these longer races, you have to want to do it yourself. You have to be the one to put one foot in front of the other continually. So I guess the place to start is make sure you want it. And then from there, just start building, take whatever the longest race you've done, find something a little bit longer. And or something a little bit harder. Mm-hmm. Maybe you've done some 50Ks, but they were relatively flat. Maybe try one that's a little more mountainous, if that's, what interests you. Incrementally push those limits is the best way. I've heard of people that go couch to 100 miles in a year. It's possible. And if that's what you really want, yeah, you can probably do that, but that's not what I would recommend.
Yeah, makes sense. All right. So this is a little, we'll edit this part out here. Is there anything that you've kind of touched on what's next for you, and forgive me, but what was the one that you're doing at the end over, Halloween at the end of October? Where's that?
That's in the Phoenix area.
And didn't you just was it a year or two ago you were in South America or Central America running?
Oh yeah, Peru.
Yeah. Do you want to talk about that?
Sure.
Yeah. So we'll kind of pick up here. So as I remember, Mike, I was kind of following along a little bit a year or two ago, and you were actually in Peru running a race. Can you tell us about what that was like?
Yeah, that was a lot of fun. It was another one of my kind of long-term curiosities was to do it. This one happened to be a stage race, which is multiple days, so you run a certain amount each day. So instead of having to run 100 miles all at once, they break it up into smaller stages. And so you're not forced to keep going, but it's kind of you're forced to keep going over days, but not having to push too much each day. And so it's this weird in between. In fact, in that particular race, there was only one day that was an ultra. We ran 50K on one of the days, but everything else was sub ultra. But in all other aspects, it was in the realm of ultras because you're having to do it multiple days. And in particular, not all stage races do it this way. There's kind of two different ways of stage racing. One is where it's like fully supported, and you basically you do a run one day, and then you go to camp and you shower and you do all that and you eat whatever you want, and then you go do another run. But this one was a self-supported. So we had to carry basically everything that we needed for the 4 days we were going to be out there. When we're in the middle of the desert, or it's actually a weird place. It's the middle of the desert, but it was right on the ocean. So we're camped out on a beach on the ocean, but there wasn't a single plant for like 30 miles.
Wow.
And so anyways, I had to fill my pack. They provided tents and water. Everything else that we needed for 4 days, we had to carry in our packs while we ran. And so that was another new aspect, was having to actually run with a pack, and you try to make it as light as possible. I think my pack was maybe in a 12 to 15 pound range at the beginning. And then as you eat, it gets a little bit lighter.
How much water did you carry?
Well, so that because they provided water,
Oh, okay.
I only carried like 2 liters at a time. But they did have a requirement. You had to be able to carry at least 2 liters. So they did have aid stations. Not a typical ultra running aid station. Those are usually, big feasts. The aid stations were just water. They had, bottled water that they would give you, and you fill in your pack and carry that to the next one.
Wow. Would you do it again?
Oh yeah, that was a lot of fun. They're very expensive to enter. The main reason I did it was that they were trying to get more North American runners down to that, because it was put on by a European company. And so they gave a bunch of us free entry to the race, which is a big component.
That's cool. Yeah.
So it's an expensive part of the sport, but I would like to do something like that again.
And do you take time to just spend in the area to like acclimate and get ready for your runs? Any places that you're traveling to?
So like in general for ultra races, it depends. Because I live in Colorado and I'm already kind of at altitude, I don't have to acclimate as much. Like, it would have been good if I ran the Leadville 100 a couple of years ago, and that one's known for being pretty high altitude, but high lonesome also is probably very similar. And it's a few thousand more feet higher up than where I live, but it's not as bad as coming from sea level. So I've never had to
do you get affected by like heat or like humidity? I would imagine may have been a thing some places. Or
yeah, humidity is a tough one. That certainly got me the 12-hour race in Tennessee.
Yeah.
How to do it.
That was, it got easily over 90 degrees and I don't know, 80% humidity, something like that. The heat really got to me there, and that was definitely the limiting factor in that race. I don't think most of the other races I've done haven't been a huge problem. I feel like I deal with heat relatively well. I'm fairly lucky. Everybody slows down in the heat, but I feel like it doesn't usually completely sap me. Other than the Tennessee race, I really felt it.
But you still set a record, didn't you?
I did. A fairly new race, so doesn't have a huge history of a lot of people going there, but yeah, I did.
Nice. Always humble. I love it. A few more questions and then we'll wrap up. But favorite gear, what is there, like running shoe brands? What kind of setup do you use for training in the actual races? I've seen people with compression shorts or compression pants with running shorts over it. What works for you? What's your combination?
Fairly flexible. I don't typically wear any of the compression stuff. I don't like, especially on like the feet. So like compression socks, those can be difficult because they're, for me at least, they're really hard to get on and off. And when you're running 100 miles, you will typically go through 1 or 2 sock changes in order to get fresh socks on your feet, to prevent them from blistering up or kind of getting trench foot. And so that's why I've steered away from doing compression socks, at least. And never really felt a benefit from just the calf sleeves. I wear several different shoe brands, but Hoka has kind of been the big one. They really figured out how to make a well-cushioned shoe that's still lightweight. That was, for a while, I really liked to try and do a more minimal shoe, but as I got older and did longer distances, I found that having some cushioning was really helpful. I never liked it because it was bulky in the past. But Hoka's really, they've got a few models that they're really finding a good balance there between providing cushion and lightweight and responsive.
Yeah, Hoka's a very interesting brand, right? When they first came out, I remember a lot of people going, wow, what is up with those shoes? They're kind of ugly, right? And I was very resistant to try them. Now understand that I am not a runner, nor am I, when my running is like 5K, right? But I think it was the Speed Goat, one of their trail shoes was just amazing. In fact, I think I finally blew them out on the Spartan race last year in Hawaii. I had to toss them after the race day because they were just done after a good year of running on them. But I agree with you. Hoka's just a pretty cool brand.
Quick curiosity: how many races does a pair of your shoes get through? I mean, you're doing 100 miles a race. Is that 1-2 races for a pair of shoes?
I mean, yeah, when you consider you're wearing them for the training up to it, then basically one pair of shoes for 100-miler, and there's actually multiple. So I've got, I don't know, 3 or 4 different shoes that I'll rotate through in my training to kind of spread the load. And there's different, if I'm running on the roads, I've got a road specific shoe as opposed to the trail specific shoes, which isn't a requirement. There's a lot of people that use road shoes on the trails, but if you can afford it, especially on some of the more technical trails, it's good to have something that's built for that.
So your next race is coming up at the end of this month, and that's in Phoenix, is it?
Yeah, the Phoenix area, Javelina 100.
Ooh, another 100-miler. Huh? That's great. You excited about that? What's your prep for that?
Yeah, I'm excited about it. I'm not treating it as my biggest race for the year, but it's because I've got the 24-hour, even later, that that's the one that I've really been thinking about all year. But now that this one's getting close, it's really getting me excited. And it's on Halloween weekend, which also happens to be Halloween is Casey and Mai's anniversary. So lucky enough to be married to somebody who supports me in this and understands, that this is good for me, and she enjoys crewing me. She enjoys, supporting me for it. And so to do something like this for our anniversary is totally copacetic with our relationship. The other interesting thing, because it's Halloween, they encourage people to dress up. And so I don't normally, because I'm so competitive, I want to wear the right stuff that's going to allow me to run my best. But I let her kind of convince me that I should dress up for this.
I was going to say, is Casey going to let you slide with that?
Yeah, I've got visions of the gorilla run. Is that what it was called?
Oh yeah, we did the gorilla run. That would not work for 100 miles. So I'm making some minor compromises, but I think I've got a costume that is still running appropriate, and will hopefully shouldn't cause any major issues.
All right, you want to reveal, or should it be a surprise when we look at your Instagram account?
Oh yeah, there will definitely be pictures on Instagram.
So I can't wait for pictures.
Yeah.
But it's I decided on Aquaman, the
Nice
classic Aquaman, so I can just wear green tights, orange top, a brief, and then I actually got a running belt that's yellow that matches with an actual costume.
I'll just call
Awesome.
you Aquaman now. Yay.
Oh, I'm
And
looking forward to
it's
seeing
going to
it.
be in the middle of the desert, and one of the things that I need to work on is staying cool. You keep your body wet, and so go to the aid stations and tell them I'm Aquaman. You have to keep me wet.
I love it.
Oh man, Mike, where can people connect with you? What's a good place?
Probably the best place to follow me is Instagram. My handle on there is RM Trails. It's just for Rocky Mountain Trails. I'm a Rocky Mountain Trail runner, so RM Trails on Instagram.
Awesome. Is there anything that we missed? Anything that you think is important for people to know?
Not that I can think of. Just find what you enjoy, and if it's running and ultra running, then then go do it.
Great advice, right? Follow your passion. I
Yeah.
love it. Mike, thanks so much for joining us. I don't know about you, but I had fun. I laughed so hard at different points.
Yeah. I love it.
And we can do that because we know you and Casey really well. So this has just been a wonderful time for us.
Yeah, it's been good.
All right. Well, best wishes on your upcoming race and then the one on New Year's as well. We will definitely follow you on Instagram and we'll keep in touch. Have a good one, Mike.
All right, thanks.